The Chevy Silverado 2500 has come in for a major facelift in Australia in 2024. This is the Silverado HD. It's got more power, more performance, and more technology than ever before, but it also lands in a segment, surprisingly, that is brimming with different options here in Australia. So does it do enough to stay ahead of its competitors? Let's find out. On sale in its native US market since 2022, the updated Chevrolet Silverado 2500 mirrors many of the changes already applied to the smaller Silverado 1500 in Australia. Visually, the new model is differentiated from the outgoing model by a bolder front bumper design, revised LED headlights, and a bow tie badge instead of Chevrolet lettering. Those changes, together with an overhaul of the interior and new technology, have been applied with no increase to the 2500 sticker price in Australia, meaning it undercuts its core Ram 2500 rival by $10,000. Well, I kind of guess it makes sense to start with the size of this thing, right? We know it's big. Anyone that's watching this and is remotely interested in this knows it's big, and that's probably part of the charm. But it's about 6.4 meters in length, 3.7 tons on the road, and a bit over 2 meters in height. So it even makes it a regular 1500 from Chevrolet, from Ford, or even from Ram as well look quite small in comparison, but you are getting greater payload and towing capacities, which we'll get to in a moment. In terms of the engine, this is it. It's the carryover 6.6 litre turbo diesel V8 Duramax engine that's been around for a little while, but it's now got more power and torque as part of this facelift. So 350 kilowatts, 1322 Newton meters, and it sends drive to all four wheels via a 10-speed Allison automatic transmission. Now, this also includes a Z71 off-road pack in Australia, so that includes a rear locking differential as well, should you choose to take this thing away from the bitumen. Okay, so some of the biggest changes for the Chevy Silverado 2500 HD have happened in the cabin. There's a lot of focus on this new touchscreen display, a lot of the new technology, but I would also say there's been some nice updates in terms of trim and specification as well. And although this thing isn't particularly cheap, $163,000 before on-road costs, it does go a long way in justifying the price tag with the level of cabin finish, inherent storage and practicality that you get. It's also a space that is quite practical and streamlines the driving experience as well. Comfy seats, low set driving position, and some nice tech that does make managing it in traffic a little bit easier. We'll get to the cameras in a second, but even things like heated, cooled seats, heated steering wheel, this cool digital rear view mirror. It's a very comfortable place to spend time. Okay, so the big talking point with the 2500 inside at least is this new infotainment system. So we have a much bigger screen and interface than before, 13.4 inch center touchscreen display, 12.3 inch digital instrument cluster. The presentation looks great. It does elevate, the sophistication of this cabin as well. And what I love is that you have these hardwired piano keys here and the hardwired switchgear below that for all your HVAC controls, which go a long way in streamlining the experience. It means you don't have to navigate through needless sub-menus of a touchscreen to find basic commands. Beyond that though, there are some really cool features with this truck, and a lot of that is around towing. So Ford has offered this for a little while now. You can automatically check your trailer lights. I obviously don't have a trailer on at the moment, but automatically check your lights so to make sure everything's working. It does a system check for you. But then you can go a step further ahead of that and the cameras. So you can have up to 14 outward facing cameras with the Silverado, and some of those include cameras on the trailer behind you. And it is really handy the way that the system works. There's even a transparent, they call it the transparent trailer camera, which basically gives you outlook of what's going on, and it uses 4 different camera angles stitched together to give you that image. It sounds, a little bit like a gimmick, but I have to say it really did make towing a 2.6 ton caravan much easier than without it. Okay, so the business end of the Silverado HD, I want to show you this party trick for starters. Everything here is automated. It really couldn't get much easier. This tailgate comes down electronically, goes up electronically, and this particular version that we're driving at the moment also has this hard cover that slides backwards and forwards. But this is your tray area, and I guess this is where you start to see the benefit of the larger 2500 frame. A little over 2 meters in length, so you will fit a couple of full-size dirt bikes lengthways, not diagonally. There are static tie down points everywhere you look, almost 10 of them, even more, 12 of them inside. No movable tie down points, but you do get lighting and of course some of these other nifty features. But I have to say, I reckon the biggest benefit with the 2500 is towing capacity. So basically there are two different ratings that you get in Australia. There's NB1, which is sort of classed as the car license equivalent, so 3.5 tons towing and all the rest, 50mm tow ball. This one's hitched up with a special caravan tow ball at the moment. But then you can actually move to an NB2 rating, which requires a light truck license in Australia, but allows you to go to 4.5 tons. And payload also increases from around 700 kilos up to 1,300 kilos, even a little bit more. So it is a really capable truck. Those numbers compare really favorably with the key rivals here. And some of the tech when it comes to towing is kind of the differentiating feature with this 2500 HD, but I'll get to those when we're driving. Okay, so driving impressions. Obviously it's big, we know it's big, this thing, but the Americans do this stuff really well. I'm gonna take you through just some around town stuff. We've also driven in with a caravan in tow too, and a little bit of light off-roading, but the basics of it, it is a very big truck. It has the origins of a truck, so it does have some truck-like tendencies. The first one is the column shifter. It's a little bit clunky in its operation. No more foot operated park brake, it's just simply a button now, and away we go. Big dual mirrors either side, and some of the cameras on board, they do go a long way in kind of streamlining the driving experience with this 2500. And I've got to be honest, it isn't long before you feel as though, you know, you've got a good handle on it. It doesn't feel overbearing and all that cumbersome, at least while you've got a little bit of speed behind you. Parking's a different story. You kind of got to think ahead there, and I don't really care what anyone says, you have to plan ahead too, because it's just hard work with normal parking spaces in these things. But hey, that's the price you pay for something so big. So in terms of regular conveyance around town, because that is, you know, let's be honest, these things are made for towing, but a lot of people are just going to be, they're going to be doing a lot of around town driving in between all of that. It works quite well. Independent front suspension, electrically assisted hydraulic steering, and of course the engine. It all combines to make quite a brutish but very capable day-to-day experience. I think the independent front end and the electrically assisted steering in particular have been quite a surprise for me, because in a lot of these trucks you jump in, if you've got any sharp bumps up front, you notice like a little bit of crashing through the steering wheel and a little bit of unwanted feedback, but that's not the case with this. The steering's light. I wouldn't say it imparts sports car levels of feedback or feeling, but it's very manageable and it's quite easy to place this car in its lane. And obviously some of the cameras help with that as well. The 10-speed automatic inherently feels like a truck transmission. It's sort of built around being robust and really playing on the torque of this engine. I wouldn't say it's the most intuitive gearbox, though it will kick down gears if you want it to. I think one of the real missing features with this truck though is steering wheel mounted paddle shifters, because there's no way that you can put it in a manual mode and lean on one gear. And I know a lot of people, they're going to want to drive this thing themselves. They're not going to want the gearbox to do everything for them. So obviously you don't have a manual mode with the gearbox, but what you do have, and it's a certain way around that in terms of downhill descents, is exhaust brakes. So I can press this button and it basically uses the grade that you're on, and it shuts down some of the vanes in the turbocharger to basically bring on more engine braking and slow this thing down. And it does work quite well. We've used it in regular conveyance, like without a load in tow, and we've also used it with the 2.6 ton caravan. And I got to say, it definitely did help arrest some of the speed and put less pressure on the disc. So onto the open road stuff as well. This is a super compliant, very comfortable place to spend time. And I think its happy place is definitely rural settings or highways alike. Like if you were doing a Sydney to Melbourne trip in this, you'd be hard pressed to find something more comfortable. It just sits planted on the road. It's very easy, it's obviously very comfortable, and the space, there's a real luxury with the space of the 2500 as well. So yeah, it's definitely revels in that open road kind of touring. And then caravan stuff. So we towed a 2.6 ton caravan. To be fair, it's probably not ever going to push the limits of the 2500. It did it without a sweat, but it was on some really rugged B-grade roads that are commonplace in Australia. So lots of opportunity for up and down movement and for the caravan to really drive the truck, but it really didn't work out that way. That is quite practical. It stayed planted and it was really impressive. And the power, there was just no shortage of it. I just found that, you know, 2.6 tons really didn't do it justice because you could barely feel like it was on in terms of the power output. You could feel the weight, but it didn't really affect the power of the 2500 all that much. So I get that a lot of people are critical of these trucks and they kind of have every right to be. But in the right setting, if you're towing especially, they do make a lot of sense. And as far as execution goes, I think the 2500 HD is a really compelling execution of the brief. Well, it's safe to say the new Chevy Silverado 2500 HD isn't everyone's cup of tea, and I do agree with you. In a lot of circumstances, it is probably totally unnecessary, the size, capacities and performance of this thing. But if you live in a rural area and you are regularly towing, it actually makes a lot of sense. It streamlines the driving experience, and this new towing tech is really impressive in person.